Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Brett Suma, who is founder and CEO at Loadsmith, and Prasad Gollapalli, who is founder and CEO at Trucker Tools. And today we're going to talk about the business case for digital freight apps. So as we head into 2022, it's clear that the business strategies of logistics service providers are tightly linked with their technology strategies too. So how does technology like digital freight apps help logistics service providers achieve their business objectives? What are, which capabilities are most important? And how do employees, carrier partners, and shipper clients benefit from these technologies? Well, those are some of the key questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have Brett and Prasad on the program to share their insights and advice on this topic. So Brett, Prasad, welcome to the program.
Great to be here, Adrian.
Yeah, Adrian, thank you very much for having me on.
So Brett, you're a first-time guest here on Talking Logistics, and I'm always curious how people get involved in the industry, and I'm sure many people are familiar with Loadsmith, but maybe some folks aren't. So maybe before we kind of dive into this topic, why don't we just start with, tell us briefly a little bit about, Loadsmith and your operations there.
Yeah, so Loadsmith, we're just a little over 2 years old. We launched in Q4 of 2019. I had been working on Loadsmith from January 1st of 2019, and we launched on October 1st. And really the previous 20 years of my career prior to January of 19 was working at night transportation, and I had worked at night for 20 years. And my entire career at night was always on the asset side of our business and solving a lot of complex logistical things related to technology and related to automated load matching and really running pieces of the business. And so I took a lot of that understanding of assets and really in the asset world, there's a couple things. It's asset utilization and driver satisfaction, right? And those like and then how does the freight that you choose to book help solve those two problems, which is driver satisfaction and asset utilization. So really, when you're working in an asset-based organization, you have to start there, and then you work with customers to make that happen. And so really from Loadsmith's beginnings, pretty much all of our core team members have come from asset-based organizations. And in fact, the very first load that we booked, nobody had ever brokered a load before. So we had our first load and we didn't know what to do. It's like we didn't know what that next step was. In terms of brokering the load. And then, fast forward 2 years later and, 40,000 loads brokered later. So we're starting to figure out how to be a broker, but really what we are is a very disciplined organization when it comes to networks and network optimization and freight and the freight that we put into our network and how that really ultimately drives back to our foundational understanding of asset utilization and driver satisfaction. And in terms of Prasad and what his organization has done and how that's such a benefit to an organization like Loadsmith, from a technology's perspective, Loadsmith, we don't view ourselves as a third-party logistics company at all. We view ourselves as a trucking company. When we're on the phone when I'm in front of a customer and talking, I talk about how we look and feel and act, and we act and look and feel like a trucking company. And so even when to the point when I'm having to have a conversation on bids of, are you an asset provider or a brokerage? I have a real hard time not selecting asset, right? Because at the end of the day, we're still providing assets. And coming full circle back to the Trucker Tools thing is that had people like Prasad not engaged in their business, Loadsmith would have never engaged in ours. And the reason I say that is because in order for Loadsmith to be able to resonate and feel like a trucking company to our customers, we have to have visibility throughout, just as if we worked at the Knights and Schneiders and Warners of the world, in terms of understanding where our customers' freight is, being able to automatically give them updates of where their freight is, just as a large asset-based trucking company can, a broker could now do that. And so I applaud Prasad for what he has done, because if he hadn't done what he has, and there's some other people in the space as well, but had they not done what they've done, we couldn't be who we are organizationally, because we wouldn't be able to have that same feel as a trucking company to our customer.
Wow, a lot of great information there to unpack, and we're going to get through some of it in as we go through our conversation here. But I think it's great, in terms of obviously the experience that you brought to Loadsmith, in terms of the perspective from the asset side of things, and how you and how that continues to drive kind of your approach, to the market, and your approach to how you do, you do business there. So I love that. And so, and the role that technology, like, Trucker Tools, has been kind of a building block to enable to do what you do out in the industry. So let's start there. I mean, when you look at I started out my opening comments by saying there's a link between, the business strategies of companies such as yourselves with the technology strategies. I mean, what is that link? I mean, in other words, how does technology, and you started addressing this a little bit, but how does technology help you achieve your overall business objectives?
Well, I think, for us, if you spend any time on our website, a lot of people who go to our website don't know if we're a third-party logistics company or a trucking company. It's maybe hard to tell. That probably is a little by design, okay? And the reason being is because we are still very much in the opinion that the trucking business is a friend of mine often joke about it's not always about the X's and O's, it's very often about the Billies and Joes. And so, trucking is still very much a Billies and Joes business, right? And so anything that we do from a technology perspective, we want for it to enhance our ability to communicate with Billies and Joes, right? And technologies such as Trucker Tools or any kind of like digital freight matching, we have our own internal one, and we want our freight available where drivers want to be, where drivers want to see it, which is why Trucker Tools is such an important part for us. But when you start really thinking about technology, there's a lot of emerging technologies that Loadsmith will participate in over the next 2 years, 3 years, 8 years, whatever time frame you want to look at. But right now, for us, we still say it's a Billy and Joe's business, and technology is there to help enhance our ability to connect with the driver ultimately, or the driver through the carrier or through the dispatcher. And so when I think about technology, I think about having Loadsmith be in places from a technology perspective that enhance our service offering, that make it easier for our carriers to find us, to work with us, to onboard with us. If you look at our onboarding as an example, we use RMIS to onboard simply because that throughput is so simple and easy for them to do. So that's the direction we went. With Trucker Tools, the throughput for us in terms of them being able to see our loads, match up to what they're doing currently, book the load with us, and then track throughout. Those technologies are all to make the driver, really for us to allow the driver to do the mundane tasks and then have a conversation with us, right? Like, really, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take away the having to call you 8 times to find out where you're at along the way. Okay. And then instead having a really meaningful conversation about what your objectives are, how your business is performing, where are there, opportunities for Loadsmith to partner more with you. But we don't have to call you 8 times for check calls. Right. So that's why we choose to deploy technologies in our business. And it really helps streamline things for us. And we can do more with less people. And in a brokerage, 65% of what you're going to spend is going to be on people. And so anything that we can do to increase our transactions per person really helps us from a profitability perspective.
Great. So, I mean, again, it seems like, you've got a very, and I love that, Billy's and Joe's, perspective in terms of it is such an important aspect of this, the fact that you can't lose sight of the people side of the business and the importance of communication and, collaboration and connectivity there. Prasad, to bring you into the conversation here. I mean, as you just listened to Brett, obviously you work with a lot of other, customers as well. I mean, is there a common thread in terms of the main business case for deploying, digital freight, technology?
Adrian, thanks for the opportunity to be here first. And Brett, thank you very much for all the kind words. So Adrian, when you think about the business case for digital technologies today, I think what Brett said is absolutely the most important thing, right? So companies like Loadsmith, they're not looking at technology as a tool anymore. They're looking at technology as a digital strategy that can help them scale faster, right? You heard the story where, Loadsmith moved their first load, and a year later they've moved for 40,000 loads. And the way they're looking at is they have people in their team with processes, but also they're using technology to come in, do mundane tasks to elevate people's productivity. That's a digital strategy they're looking at. That's one thing. The second thing they're also looking at is, how can I add more value to my shippers, to my customers? What other opportunities can I help my customers with? How can I improve the productivity of my carriers, right? So that is in a very essence is a network that people like Brett are creating because of digital technology as their backbone, right? So this is a marriage. This is not like one trumps the other, right? And that is an essential part for today's brokerages to scale faster. I mean, Brett's been a veteran in this space, so for us to hear 2 years, less than 2 years, being in business, going from 0 loads to over 40,000 loads is an unheard story now, right? Before, if you go to 10, 15 years back, it's very hard to hear these stories, but those stories are true now. And this happened during COVID. And that's because, leaders like Brett and others, what they're doing is they're not looking at their 3PL as a company that needs a bunch of tools. They're looking at their company as people, technology, processes, right? How do you mash these 3 things together, come up with your own secret sauce to really scale up their business, provide better services to their customers, both shippers and carriers? And that mindset shift can only happen with the digital technology. And I'll touch one last thing on digital technology is the difference we are seeing compared to 10, 15 years back technology is digital technologies have few things that make them really good. First of all, they're connected with people in real time. So real-time information, when a shipper wants to know where the truck is, it's not 10 hours ago data, right? It's right now where the truck is, right? 2, digital technologies operate on data, right? If a truck is running behind, or if a particular carrier runs the same lane on Monday, putting that load in front of him, right? Making that process easier and using machine learning. So there are a lot of these mundane tasks that can happen, that the data that can be used to really elevate efficiencies, right? Improve our efficiencies, elevate the game for our customers, 3PLs, brokers, and carriers, right? That can only happen through digital technology.
the point you brought up before, I mean, I think that's one of the key learnings, and we've done some research in this area, but I think one of the things that's come about in terms of one of the key learnings over the past 2 years is that the industry needs to become much more data driven. And I think, to your point, Prasad, I think, when you marry the amount of data that is flowing through systems such as, platforms such as yours, and then you marry that with optimization, you marry that with machine learning, you marry that with other, kind of smart tools, that's where the efficiencies come in, and the power comes into, be able for companies like, Loadsmith to be able to scale relatively quickly without having to add an army of people while doing it. So Brett, and you touched upon a little bit about this. I mean, like I mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of different, I think particularly if there's a company that's starting out like you were, 2 years ago, and they're trying to look at the technology landscape. I mean, there's a variety of different, options out there, and ways to think about, what's the right technology for them. I mean, what were some of the, as you got started with this process, I mean, what were some of the capabilities or attributes that were most important to you in your selection process, and what ultimately led you to select, Trucker Tools as your partner?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Prasad just said, because Prasad, not in the same order, he just described my entire job description. Okay, so in our business, my entire job description is people, processes, and technology. And that's it. Those are the three things that I work on. And so he touched on those. It's funny for him to say that, but those three things are the driver behind Loadsmith in terms of what my task is, and identifying the right people, developing the right processes, and then using technologies to help allow us to have more efficient processes and really more effective people in terms of what they can accomplish in a given day. And so, when and again, I come back to, we would not have started Loadsmith had there not been businesses such as Trucker Tools that allowed real-time freight visibility for us to communicate with our customers. We wouldn't have done it. The technology had to be there. For me, there was a couple things thinking about leaving my career. Okay, if I was going to do that, and if my partners and I were going to really actually make something special at Loadsmith, it had to start with the ability for us to be able to feel like a trucking company. And that started with real-time freight visibility, right? And so there was a couple of things that happened. You had the electronic logging, mandate. Now all of a sudden we knew that every carrier would be able to be tracked, okay? And then you had people such as Prasad that were really visionaries in terms of the ability to key into that from a tracking perspective. And then really, I admire him in understanding how to commercialize his business, right? So commercializing his business by saying, hey, I can offer this to the brokers, okay? And I know I can offer that because I'm offering this to the driver, right? And so the driver benefits. And so now usage and adoption, and we always know in technology that adoption is the biggest thing, right? And so when you look at the adoption of Trucker Tools, and then to be able to commercialize that to somebody like me that says, I have to have that because in order for me to accomplish my business objectives, I need what Prasad can offer. So I think that his business model and the way that we handled it was so genius, really, because you're talking about the Billies and Joes who sometimes are maybe going to be a little more tech adverse, right? Like, and not maybe look for tech adoption. And so they gain something by using Trucker Tools, and then Trucker Tools continues to add abilities for the broker to gain and also for the carrier. And so now this second iteration, I'm interested in Trucker Tools because I'm not only interested in the tracking aspect of it, but I'm interested in getting my freight into their marketplace so that they know that, that if the driver sees, oh, I'm headed from point A to point B and there's Loadsmith's load and I can click on it and book it. And, so when I, coming back to answer your question though, Adrian, when we first started, technology, we always knew that we didn't want to be considered quote unquote a digital broker. And the reason being is because we take a lot of pride on answering the phone and having conversations. And so, and that's not to say that from a technology perspective, like we're in the process of developing our own driver app and carrier portal. And if you, went to app.loadsmith.com, you could see all of our loads and you can, action on them. If you're registered with us, you can book them. The app will be in the App Store on March 1st, both Apple and Android. It's really cool. But at the end of the day, it's really cool for Loadsmith carriers. But there are a lot of carriers that aren't Loadsmith carriers, right? And so we recognize that we have to be almost app agnostic, as opposed to being like, oh, well, we've built this technology and our technology is the only technology, like that just it's not how we are. We are a tremendous sales organization and a tremendous execution organization. We are not the, first off, we don't even have a single IT person in our whole entire company. So we're not going to set the world on fire when it comes to technology ourselves, right? That's just, we are, we know what we're good at, right? We're great with customers. We're great with drivers and carriers. We'll leave the smart people like Prasad on the technology side to do their thing. And then we'll piggyback off of that, right? And then it'll be, and from a commercialization perspective, it works for both of us. And then all of a sudden you're starting to really work in unison on, hey, how can we collaborate more? What are things that you're seeing that we could be doing better? What are things that we would like to see? For us, I always try to tell people, because it's really great that, we're like our projection for 22 is to do 105 million in revenue. That's really great, but we're like in the top of the second inning for our company right now, right? Like we really haven't done anything. So, we will continue to keep our eyes open and our, and listening when it comes to technologies that we can use to help us and to partner with people such as Prasad and his group.
Great overview there. And I loved, when you started out by talking about, part of the thing that, you focused on was with regards to any technology, it being a win-win-win, proposition, win for you, a win for your carriers, and a win for your shipper, clients as well. So I'm going to actually conclude, kind of diving into that a little bit more. But before I get to that question, Prasad, your thoughts. I mean, I think Brett did a nice job in terms of the way he thinks about technology, or how he approached technology as he was getting Loadsmith up off the ground and on a great trajectory here. I mean, is there something that companies sometimes overlook or shouldn't overlook, when evaluating digital freight apps?
Yes, and what Brett said is very well articulated from a leadership point of view, right? An ideal customer, Loadsmith is, right? What most of the people do when they look at technology is they think technology is an off-the-shelf product. Like, I'm buying this, I'm going to use it for what it's intended to do. That's about it, right? It's like, going to a dealership and saying, I'm buying a car, right? Or, not thinking more beyond that. Now, what Brett said towards the end of his comment was so profound, is I wanted to reiterate that. He wants to understand the technologies, the vendors or partners' strategy, right? I mean, he laid out our strategy very well. So, first of all, he understood where our strategies. Two, he also mentioned two things that are very, very powerful. What does this strategy do? What does this vendor do today? Where else can they go next? That second part is what's typically overlooked. So oftentimes when you buy a product off the shelf and you're thinking this is it, you're not trying to push that vendor to think beyond that product. Whereas when you tell the vendor, this is great, your product does XYZ great, but I also need you to do more. Or where else are you thinking your product would go? Right? Having that conversation opens up to help the vendor understand where you want the product to go. It's absolutely important for 3PLs, transportation companies, to pull the technology vendors along their business strategy. Kind of like push and pull, right? You tell them, hey, great, you're doing this, but I need you to also do this. So it's a tandem race there, right? And the analogy I can come up with, as Brett was saying this, was you can go to a dealership, buy a car, or imagine if you could talk to Elon Musk and tell him what he should be building next. That is more powerful to me as a business than just buying the car from the dealership lot.
I love, and you're right. I mean, I think, not only thinking about the short-term immediate needs, but, taking that longer-term perspective and really going back to the whole premise of the conversation, right? Linking the business strategy with the technology strategy. Well, your business strategy is not just what are we going to do this week, this month, this year? It's also, I mean, I'm sure Brett already has plans for his 2022 growth projection, but he knows where I'm speaking for you, Brett, here, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but where you want the company to be 5 years from now, and some of the things you want to be doing 5 years from now. And as part of that, your technology partners need to help enable you, to get there. So having those conversations, as you talked about, Prasad, are going to be important moving forward. So as a way to, wrap up, Brett, I'll start with you, and then Prasad, you can, add anything you'd like from your perspective. Going back to what you mentioned earlier, Brett, talking about the benefits, of applying these, types of technology. I mean, what benefits have your employees, your carrier partners, and your shipper clients, have experienced as a result of, the technologies such as, trucker tools that you've been able to implement?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it, we have a business analyst named Catherine that works with us, and she's about 5 times smarter than me. And my push to her is, from a technology perspective, Catherine, let's figure out how to increase our transactions per employee by 20%, okay, while at the same time making their lives better, right? Like, we don't want to just say, okay, we're going to bring on 20% more freight and not add anybody, because that's how you can increase your transactions per employee by 20%, right? Now, we're a pretty good sales organization. We probably could do that, okay? But what we really want to do is we want to say, what are technologies that we can utilize that actually make our employees' jobs and their lives better, even though our productivity is down, right? And so Trucker Tools, the reason that we partnered with Trucker Tools is that we had an employee that had a previous relationship with Trucker Tools and said, we're really missing out organizationally by not being partnered with Trucker Tools. And it's my job then to listen, right? And to listen to my employees and say, we will be more productive if we have Trucker Tools. And so those are the things that I have to do in my job, is to listen, right? And Catherine has to do in her job in terms of recognizing technologies that actually increase productivity, but by making people's jobs and ultimately their lives better. And Trucker Tools has done that for us. Now, what it does for our carriers, they can see our freight, right? Like, they can see our freight. They can action on our freight if they want to haul a load. Whether they see it in Trucker Tools or on our native app, however they see it, okay. Those are the technologies that allow those carriers. And really what it comes back to for us is, from a carrier perspective, is we want to, I always say this, like, right, when I worked at night, I don't know how many driver reviews I did in the cab of the truck, because there's a big difference between doing a review with a driver in my office versus his office, right? And so that's how we still view being in the office with the driver. So I always imagine our driver being in their office at a truck stop at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, and hell, they probably are using trucker tools to work on whatever, all the different things that trucker tools has. And then there's a Loadsmith load and says, hey, you should consider doing this, right? So we want to be in the office with the driver. The driver uses trucker tools more than any other driver app. And so we want to be partnered with that, right? And then from a customer perspective, to be honest with you, the way that trucker tools does their tracking, especially the interrupted tracking notifications, I particularly like that feature. Our customers, we do business with a lot of really, really large shippers. And those customers require us to have tracking. And it's a lot easier for us to be able to, have a driver utilizing trucker tools, and then however the customer chooses to get it, okay, how they get the information. It just makes us, for lack of a better word, a more legitimate business. And when we started Loadsmith, there was 4 people, okay? If you went to our website at that time, because our website hasn't changed, but if you had gone to our website at that time, no customer that I called on thought that we only had 4 people, right? We represented much larger than we were at the time when we launched. Now I can say with all the confidence in the world that we do deliver all of those things because we are partnering with people like Trucker Tools, that from a customer perspective make us more legitimate because we're able to give them exactly what they're needing from us in terms of visibility, which again was the reason that we felt like we could start Loadsmith and feel like a trucking company.
Great. I mean, I think you described it very well in terms of those 3 constituencies, in terms of how they benefit, your employees, and be able to make their lives easier, and they're, making them excited about coming to work as opposed to dreading, coming to work. It's same thing with the drivers and being in their office, which I love that perspective. I hadn't heard about that to kind of phrase that way, but I love that imagery of being in their office, which is their cab, right? Where they spend, most of their time. And then obviously, the shipper clients that want that visibility. Prasad, anything to add to wrap up the conversation here?
I think Brett said things very well. He's an ideal 3PL, or want to call him as a transportation company, not 3PL so much.
Thanks,
because the way, Brett, I like the way you look at carriers as an extension of your company, right? And I want to touch on that last point that Brett said is, in today's world, if you're a transportation company, whether a 3PL, a broker, or a carrier, right? And if you are a vendor, technology vendor, the relationship between these 2 sides is not a transactional one. It's a marriage. And that marriage is only helpful for the betterment of both sides. And it can only happen when, the way, Brett, I'm borrowing this statement from you, is, we want to improve 20% of our transactions per employee, right? And want to do this without making their life difficult, actually making their life better. Right? How do we do this? Through using technology. Ask the vendor, right? And putting that challenge along helps the vendors align better with the customers. And that is one of the biggest things that transportation industry has missed for the last, previous decades. And now that has changed in the last 5 years or so. It's changing, and we're seeing more of companies like, Loadsmith. And, it's, again, I'm not saying we can hear stories like in 2 years growing from 0 to 40 is a regular thing, but it's an interesting thing. The trend is in this direction, and that can only happen when we work together as collaborate. And that's the part oftentimes 3PLs miss to really lean on. And actually vendors also miss. So we make it a point when we bring customers like Brett, tell us if something doesn't work. We don't take it personal. We actually see it as an opportunity to work better. And that tells us to go back to the drawing board and do something better every day. That's an opportunity. And that's the part I think is changing. I want our industry to lean hard on this, because the next 10 years, the challenges are going to be really big, right? I mean, how many more efficiencies can we draw out of this supply chain, right? There are a bunch of those, but we can only do it if we work together and collaborate.
Yeah, a lot of great points, both of you brought. And, I think this is a topic that, like you said, Prasad, is it's going to be continued to be in the forefront. I mean, just this week, we saw here in the United States, the White House put forth, an action plan on focus on the trucking industry and how to attract and retain, more drivers, because, going back to some of the points you talked about, Brett, in terms of driver satisfaction and how to, employee satisfaction, satisfaction across the industry, whether you're a transportation company, a carrier, a driver, or even a shipper. I mean, I think everyone has recognized over the past 2 years that supply chain, logistics, transportation is critically important to the success of every company, and making sure that the Billies and Joes and Marys and Sues that work in this industry, feel positive about this industry, feel motivated to be in this industry, and technology plays a role in all of that, as we talked through today's episode. So again, Brett, Prasad, thank you very much for making the time to be with us today.
Thanks for being for the opportunity.
Thank you, Prasad. Thank you, Adrian. It's good seeing both of you.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us today. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Trucker Tool website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Brett or Prasad, you can post it there. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.